This is the story of Charles Babbage, the gentle dreamer whose mind reached far beyond his time, whose ideas would lay dormant for over a century before the world was ready to understand their true magnificence. Before we start, consider subscribing to the channel. So close your eyes and let us journey together through the remarkable life of a man who saw the future in brass gears and mechanical precision, who hosted the most brilliant minds of Victorian London in his drawing room, and who designed the very first computer long before electricity would power our modern world. Chapter 1. The Tender Beginning. On a cold December morning in 1791, specifically December 26th, in a modest house in London, Charles Babbage entered a world that would never quite be ready for his extraordinary mind. The soft cries of the newborn pierced the winter air as Benjamin Babbage, a successful London banker, held his son for the first time, unaware that this child would one day be called the father of the computer. Young Charles was one of 4 children born to Benjamin and Betsy Plumley Teep Babbage. The Babbage household was one of comfortable prosperity, with Benjamin's banking partnership with William Preed providing the family with financial security that would prove crucial to Charles's future pursuits. The gentle tick of grandfather clocks and the rustle of ledger pages filled the family home, sounds that perhaps first introduced Charles to the rhythm and precision that would define his life's work. Working with Joseph Clement, a skilled machinist, Charles began the painstaking process of designing and building the engine. The workshop became a temple of precision, filled with the sounds of careful filing, the turning of lathes, and the constant checking and rechecking of measurements. Every gear tooth had to be perfect, every shaft aligned with mathematical precision. But Charles's restless mind was already moving beyond the difference engine. Even as work proceeded on the first machine, he began to envision something far more ambitious, a machine that could be programmed to perform any calculation, not just the polynomial functions of the difference engine. This dream would eventually become the analytical engine, but for now, it remained a whisper of possibility in the back of his ever-active mind. Chapter 6. Triumph and Tragedy. The year 1827 began with such promise for Charles Babbage. His scientific reputation was firmly established, his difference engine project was progressing, and his family life brought him daily joy. Georgiana had proven herself not just a loving wife, but also an intelligent companion who could discuss his work and offer valuable insights. Their home was filled with laughter, scientific discussion, and the comfortable routines of domestic happiness. But 1827 would prove to be the darkest year of Charles's life. First, his beloved father Benjamin passed away, leaving Charles not just emotionally devastated, but also suddenly responsible for the family's banking interests. The loss of his father, who had supported and encouraged his scientific pursuits despite occasional disagreements, struck Charles deeply. Then tragedy struck again with crushing force. Georgiana, weakened by her 8th pregnancy, died from complications following childbirth late in 1827. She was only 35 years old, and her death left Charles shattered and alone with their surviving children. The woman who had been his intellectual companion, loving partner, and the center of his domestic world was gone, leaving an emptiness that would never be completely filled. The double loss of his father and wife within months of each other left Charles emotionally and spiritually bereft. The comfortable world he had built for himself lay in ruins, and even his scientific work seemed to lose much of its meaning. Picture him in his study, surrounded by the mechanical drawings and gear wheels that had once excited him, but now feeling nothing but the cold touch of brass and steel. Unable to bear the memories that filled every corner of his London home, Charles made the painful decision to leave England entirely. He packed his essential belongings and embarked on an extended journey through continental Europe, seeking solace in travel and hoping that distance might ease the crushing weight of his grief. For months, Charles wandered through France, Italy, and other European countries, visiting scientific institutions, meeting fellow mathematicians, and trying to find some purpose in his shattered life. He stood before the great cathedrals of Europe, walked along Mediterranean shores, and sat in Parisian cafes, always carrying with him the invisible burden of his losses. During this period of wandering, Charles's mechanical projects lay dormant. The difference engine remained unfinished in Joseph Clement's workshop, gathering dust while its creator searched for the will to continue. Yet even in his darkest moments, Charles's brilliant mind continued to work, processing new ideas and forming connections that would later prove crucial to his greatest achievements. Chapter 7: Return and Renewal. Charles returned to London in 1828, fundamentally changed by his experiences but determined to rebuild his life and continue his scientific work. The inheritance from his father had made him a wealthy man, freeing him from financial concerns and allowing him to pursue his research with unprecedented independence. He purchased a grand new house at 1 Dorset Street, Marylebone, which would become the headquarters of his scientific endeavors and social activities for the rest of his life. That same year, Charles received one of the greatest honors of his career when he was appointed to the Lucasian Chair of Mathematics at Cambridge University, a position once held by Isaac Newton himself. The appointment carried enormous prestige and provided Charles with an academic platform from which to pursue his research, though he would prove to be an unconventional professor, rarely giving lectures during his 11 years in the position. But perhaps more importantly for Charles's emotional recovery, he began hosting his famous Saturday night soirees at his Dorset Street home. These gatherings started as simple dinner parties, but gradually evolved into the most sought-after scientific and social events in London. Picture Charles, dressed in his finest evening clothes, welcoming guests into his elegant drawing room, where the latest scientific instruments and models of his mechanical engines were displayed alongside fine art and comfortable furniture. The soirees became legendary for bringing together the most brilliant and diverse minds of the age. On any given Saturday evening, One might encounter Charles Darwin deep in conversation with the Duke of Wellington, while Charles Dickens regaled a group with dramatic readings and Michael Faraday demonstrated his latest electrical experiments. The poet Lord Byron's daughter, Ada Lovelace, would discuss mathematical concepts with the precision of a trained scholar, while musicians and even magicians might entertain the gathered guests. These gatherings were more than mere social events. They were intellectual incubators where ideas were exchanged, collaborations formed, and the future was quite literally being discussed and planned. Charles proved to be a masterful host, moving gracefully between groups, facilitating introductions, and ensuring that conversation flowed as smoothly as the fine wine he served his guests. The soirees helped heal Charles's wounded spirit by surrounding him with brilliant, engaging people who shared his passion for knowledge and discovery. The loneliness that had consumed him after Georgiana's death gradually gave way to a different kind of fulfillment, one derived from intellectual companionship and the excitement of shared scientific exploration. Chapter 8: The Analytical Engine Vision. By the mid-1830s, Charles's restless intellect had moved far beyond the difference engine toward a much more ambitious project. The idea had been growing in his mind for years, a vision of a machine that could not just calculate predetermined functions, but could be programmed to perform any mathematical operation. He called this revolutionary concept the analytical engine, and it would prove to be centuries ahead of its time. The analytical engine was designed to be a true general-purpose computer, incorporating all the essential elements that would later appear in electronic computers. It would have a mill for performing calculations, which we would now call a processor, and a store for holding numbers and intermediate results, which we recognize as memory. Most remarkably, it would be controlled by punched cards, allowing it to be programmed for different tasks. Picture Charles in his study, surrounded by detailed mechanical drawings, his mind racing with possibilities as he sketched gear trains and calculating mechanisms. The analytical engine would be enormous, steam-powered, and incredibly complex, requiring advances in precision manufacturing that were barely possible with 19th-century technology. Yet Charles could see it all clearly in his mind's eye, a brass and steel marvel that would revolutionize human calculation. The machine was designed to have a memory capable of holding 1,000 numbers of 50 digits each, a specification that would have seemed impossibly ambitious to Charles's contemporaries. It would be controlled by two sets of punched cards, operation cards that told it what to do, and variable cards that told it what numbers to work with. The concept of stored programming, which would not be rediscovered until the mid-20th century, was fully developed in Charles's mind over 150 years ago. But the analytical engine was more than just a complex calculator. Charles envisioned that it could be programmed to follow conditional instructions, to repeat operations, and to make decisions based on its calculations. In modern terms, it would have been capable of loops, conditional branching, and all the logical structures that define computer programming today. Working feverishly on his designs, Charles produced thousands of pages of detailed drawings and specifications. He calculated gear ratios, designed mechanical linkages, and solved countless engineering problems that would challenge even modern computer designers. The scope of his vision was breathtaking in its completeness and sophistication. Yet Charles faced a fundamental problem that would plague him throughout his life. The analytical engine was so far ahead of its time that few people could understand its significance. Government officials saw only an expensive and impractical contraption. Fellow scientists, brilliant though they were, could not grasp the revolutionary implications of programmable mechanical computation. Charles often felt like a prophet preaching to an uncomprehending world. Chapter 9. Meeting Ada Lovelace. On a warm June evening in 1833, Charles Babbage's life took a remarkable turn when he met a brilliant young woman who would become both his closest intellectual collaborator and one of history's most significant contributors to computer science. Ada Lovelace, the daughter of the famous poet Lord Byron, was just 17 years old when she first encountered Charles at one of his Saturday night soirees. Ada had been brought to the gathering by her mother, Lady Byron, and their mutual friend Mary Somerville, a distinguished mathematician in her own right. Unlike many young ladies of her social class, Ada had been given an excellent mathematical education, partly as a deliberate attempt by her mother to counteract any poetic tendencies she might have inherited from her notorious father. Picture the scene in Charles's elegantly appointed drawing room, filled with the soft light of gas lamps and the gentle hum of intellectual conversation. Charles, now 42 and at the height of his social powers, was demonstrating his partially completed difference engine to a group of fascinated guests when the young Ada approached. Her questions were not the polite inquiries typical of society ladies, but penetrating technical queries that revealed a deep understanding of mathematical principles. Charles was immediately struck by Ada's intellectual gifts. Here was someone who not only understood the mechanical principles of his engines, but could also perceive their broader implications for human knowledge and capability. Their initial conversation stretched late into the evening, covering topics from the philosophy of mathematics to the potential applications of mechanical calculation. The friendship that developed between Charles and Ada was extraordinary in its depth and intellectual intensity. Despite their 25-year age difference, they discovered in each other kindred spirits who shared a vision of what mechanical computation might achieve. Ada possessed something that few of Charles's contemporaries had: the ability to see beyond the brass gears and steel mechanisms to envision the true potential of programmable machines. Their correspondence, which began shortly after their first meeting, reveals two brilliant minds challenging and inspiring each other. Ada's letters to Charles combine rigorous mathematical analysis with flights of poetic imagination, describing her vision of machines that might someday compose music, create art, or engage in forms of reasoning that seemed almost magical to 19th-century minds. Charles found in Ada not just an intellectual equal, but someone who could articulate the significance of his work in ways that he himself sometimes struggled to express. She understood that the analytical engine was not just a more sophisticated calculator, but represented a fundamentally new relationship between human intelligence and mechanical capability. Their collaboration would prove to be one of the most productive partnerships in the history of science and technology, laying the groundwork for concepts that would not be fully realized until the advent of electronic computers more than a century later. Chapter 10: The Great Collaboration. The partnership between Charles Babbage and Ada Lovelace blossomed into one of the most remarkable intellectual collaborations of the 19th century. By the late 1830s, Ada had married William King, who later became the Earl of Lovelace, making her the Countess of Lovelace, but she continued to correspond regularly with Charles about mathematical and mechanical matters. Ada's unique contribution to Charles's work became clear when Luigi Menabrea, an Italian mathematician, published a memoir about the analytical engine in French. Charles suggested that Ada translate the work into English, but she went far beyond mere translation, adding extensive notes that were longer and more insightful than the original paper. Picture Ada in her study at her country estate, surrounded by mathematical papers and mechanical drawings, working late into the night by candlelight as she crafted what would become her most famous contribution to computer science. Her Note G, as it came to be known, contained the first published computer program, an algorithm for calculating Bernoulli numbers using the analytical engine. But Ada's vision extended far beyond mere calculation. In her notes, she wrote prophetically about the potential for mechanical computation to transcend numbers and work with any symbols that could be logically manipulated. She envisioned machines that might someday compose music, create art, or manipulate abstract concepts, ideas that would not be seriously considered by mainstream computer scientists until the latter half of the 20th century. Charles was delighted by Ada's insights and encouraged her ambitious thinking. Their letters from this period reveal two minds pushing each other to ever greater heights of imagination and technical sophistication. Ada challenged Charles to think beyond the mechanical details of his engines, to consider their philosophical and practical implications, while Charles provided the technical knowledge that grounded her visionary ideas in engineering reality. The collaboration was not without its tensions. Both Charles and Ada had strong personalities and definite opinions about their work. When Charles attempted to add his own political commentary to Ada's translated memoir without her knowledge, she firmly insisted that her work be published without his unauthorized additions, demonstrating her intellectual independence and professional integrity. Their working relationship was characterized by mutual respect and genuine affection. Charles recognized Ada's genius and often sought her advice on complex theoretical problems, while Ada appreciated Charles's mechanical ingenuity and his willingness to pursue seemingly impossible dreams. Together, They created a body of work that laid the theoretical foundation for the computer age. The correspondence between Charles and Ada during their most productive period reads like a dialogue between two prophets, each seeing glimpses of a future that their contemporaries could not imagine. They discussed concepts like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and computational creativity, with a sophistication that would not be matched until the mid-20th century. Chapter 11. Recognition and Frustration. As Charles's reputation grew throughout the 1830s and 1840s, so did his frustration with the limitations of his era's technology and the short-sightedness of government officials. The precision engineering required for his analytical engine pushed far beyond what 19th-century manufacturing could reliably achieve, and the costs involved were staggering by the standards of the time. The British government, which had initially supported the difference engine project with considerable funding, gradually lost patience with Charles's ambitious but incomplete work. Politicians who had expected quick results found themselves confronted with ever-evolving designs and mounting expenses. In 1842, the government officially abandoned the project, leaving Charles's dreams unfunded and unfinished. Picture Charles in his workshop, surrounded by partially completed mechanical components, brass gears gleaming in the gaslight, knowing that he possessed the knowledge to create machines that could revolutionize human calculation, but lacking the resources to bring his visions to reality. The frustration must have been almost unbearable for a man of his perfectionist temperament and ambitious nature. During this period, Charles received the recognition of his peers even as his projects remained unfinished. In 1824, he was awarded the Gold Medal of the Royal Astronomical Society for his work on calculating engines. The honor was deeply meaningful to Charles, representing acknowledgement from serious scientists who understood the significance of his theoretical contributions, even if they could not fully grasp the practical implications. Charles's tenure as Lucasian Professor of Mathematics at Cambridge from 1828 to 1839 was marked more by his research than by his teaching. He rarely delivered lectures, preferring to spend his time working on his mechanical designs and hosting his famous soirees. His unconventional approach to the professorship reflected his belief that original research was more valuable than traditional academic instruction. Despite the setbacks with government funding, Charles never lost faith in the ultimate value of his work. He continued to refine his designs, produce detailed drawings, and correspond with fellow scientists and engineers about the principles of mechanical computation. His personal fortune, inherited from his father, allowed him to continue his research independently, though on a much smaller scale than he had originally envisioned. The scientific community of Charles's time was divided in its assessment of his work. Some contemporaries recognized him as a visionary genius whose ideas were simply ahead of their time, while others viewed him as an impractical dreamer who promised more than he could deliver. This mixed reception added to Charles's sense of isolation and frustration, even as he continued to push the boundaries of what was theoretically possible. Throughout these challenging years, Charles maintained his optimism about the future of mechanical computation. He believed, with absolute certainty, that future generations would possess the technological capabilities necessary to build machines based on his designs, and that his theoretical work would eventually be vindicated by practical success. Chapter 12. The Broader Inventor. While Charles Babbage is remembered primarily for his calculating engines, his inventive genius extended far beyond the realm of mechanical computation. His restless mind generated innovations across a remarkable range of fields, demonstrating the breadth of his scientific curiosity and practical problem-solving abilities. One of Charles's most widely adopted inventions was the railway cowcatcher, the metal frame attached to the front of locomotives to clear obstacles from the tracks. This simple but effective device prevented countless accidents and became standard equipment on trains throughout the world. Picture Charles studying the mechanics of railway safety, perhaps during one of his own train journeys, and recognizing the need for a systematic solution to the problem of track obstructions. Charles also invented an early form of speedometer for railways, allowing engineers to monitor their velocity with unprecedented precision. This innovation contributed significantly to railway safety and efficiency, helping to establish the reliable schedules that made rail transport practical for both passengers and freight. His contributions to lighthouse technology included the development of occulting lights, rotating mechanisms that created distinctive flashing patterns to help sailors identify specific lighthouses at night. Each lighthouse could have its own unique signature, greatly improving maritime navigation and reducing the risk of ships running aground in unfamiliar waters. In the field of astronomy, Charles invented a type of ophthalmoscope that allowed scientists to study the structure of the eye with greater precision. This instrument had applications both in medical diagnosis and in understanding the optical principles that governed human vision, contributing to advances in both fields. Charles's work on actuarial tables helped establish the mathematical foundations of the modern insurance industry. His careful analysis of mortality data and risk assessment provided insurers with more accurate methods for calculating premiums and reserves, making life insurance more accessible and affordable for ordinary families. Even in the realm of public policy, Charles made significant contributions. He advocated for uniform postal rates, a reform that would eventually make written communication more accessible to all social classes. His analysis of postal efficiency helped lay the groundwork for the modern postal system that we still use today. Throughout all these diverse endeavors, Charles displayed the same meticulous attention to detail and systematic approach that characterized his work on calculating engines. He possessed that rare combination of theoretical brilliance and practical common sense that allowed him to see problems clearly and devise elegant solutions. Chapter 13. the social lion of London. By the 1830s, Charles Babbage had become one of London's most celebrated hosts, and his Saturday night soirees were the most coveted invitations in the intellectual and social circles of the capital. These gatherings transformed his Dorset Street home into a unique salon where science, literature, politics, and art converged in brilliant conversation. The guest list for a typical soiree read like a directory of Victorian greatness. Charles Darwin might be found in earnest discussion with the Duke of Wellington about the implications of natural selection for military strategy, while Charles Dickens entertained a rapt audience with dramatic readings from his latest work. Michael Faraday would demonstrate his electrical experiments, creating sparks and mysterious forces that seemed almost magical to observers. Picture the scene in Charles's elegantly appointed drawing room, filled with the warm glow of gas lamps and the gentle murmur of intellectual discourse. Servants moved quietly among the guests, offering refreshments while the host himself circulated with gracious efficiency, introducing scientists to poets, mathematicians to musicians, and inventors to aristocrats. The atmosphere was one of respectful curiosity, where ideas were valued above social rank and brilliant conversation was the highest form of entertainment. Ada Lovelace was a regular attendee at these gatherings, and her presence added a unique dimension to the intellectual atmosphere. As one of the few women in London with serious mathematical training, she could hold her own in technical discussions while also bringing a fresh perspective to scientific problems. Her conversations with Charles often continued long after other guests had departed, the two minds delighting in the exploration of theoretical possibilities. The soirees served multiple purposes for Charles. They provided him with intellectual stimulation and social connection after the loneliness that had followed his wife's death. They also served as informal laboratories for testing ideas, as Charles could present his latest theories to some of the most brilliant minds of his generation and receive immediate feedback and criticism. Charles proved to be a masterful host, possessing that rare combination of intellectual brilliance and social grace that made everyone feel welcome and appreciated. His patience in explaining complex mechanical principles to non-technical guests was legendary, and many attendees commented on his ability to make even the most abstract mathematical concepts accessible and interesting. The soirees also served as recruitment opportunities for Charles's various projects and causes. He used these gatherings to build support for scientific societies, to find collaborators for research projects, and to advocate for government funding of scientific research. Many important scientific partnerships and institutional relationships were forged in the comfortable atmosphere of his drawing room. These Saturday evenings represented Charles at his most successful and fulfilled. Surrounded by brilliant friends and engaged in stimulating conversation, he could temporarily forget the frustrations of his unfinished engines and bask in the appreciation of his intellectual peers. Chapter 14. The Persistent Visionary. Despite repeated setbacks and mounting skepticism from government officials and even some scientific colleagues, Charles never wavered in his conviction that mechanical computation represented the future of human intellectual endeavor. Throughout the 1840s and 1850s, he continued to refine his designs for the analytical engine, producing ever more detailed drawings and specifications. Working in relative isolation, Charles developed concepts that would not be rediscovered until the advent of electronic computers a century later. His notebooks from this period reveal a mind of extraordinary persistence and creativity, constantly seeking new solutions to the engineering challenges posed by his visionary designs. Picture Charles in his study during the long London evenings, bent over his drafting table by the light of oil lamps, his practiced hand sketching intricate gear trains and mechanical linkages. Each drawing represented hours of careful calculation, each mechanism the solution to a specific computational problem. The walls of his workspace were covered with diagrams showing different aspects of the analytical engine, creating a visual encyclopedia of mechanical computation. Charles's correspondence during this period reveals his growing frustration with the technological limitations of his era. He could see clearly in his mind how every component of the analytical engine should function, but the precision manufacturing required to build such a machine remained tantalizingly beyond reach. The tolerances he required for gear teeth, the uniformity he needed in metal components, and the accuracy he demanded in mechanical assembly all pushed far beyond what 19th-century workshops could reliably achieve. Yet Charles refused to compromise his vision. Lesser inventors might have settled for simpler, more buildable designs, but Charles understood that the true potential of mechanical computation could only be realized through uncompromising pursuit of perfection. He believed that future generations would possess the manufacturing capabilities necessary to build his engines exactly as he had conceived them. During these years, Charles also turned his attention to other scientific and practical problems, perhaps partly as a relief from the frustrations of his computational work. His investigations into industrial processes, his contributions to astronomical calculation, and his work on lighthouse design all demonstrated the same systematic approach and innovative thinking that characterized his engine designs. The isolation of these later years was partially self-imposed. Charles had grown tired of trying to explain his vision to people who could not understand it, and he preferred to work quietly on perfecting his designs rather than engage in futile attempts at persuasion. His genius required solitude to fully flower, and he found in his workshop and study the peace necessary for deep creative work. Chapter 15. The Final Years. As Charles Babbage entered his 70s, he remained as intellectually active as ever, though his body was beginning to show the effects of his long and productive life. His hair had turned white, his step had slowed, but his mind continued to generate new ideas and refinements to his mechanical designs with undiminished vigor. The London of Charles's final years was dramatically different from the city of his youth. Gas lighting had given way to electric illumination in many areas. Railways connected the capital to every corner of Britain, and telegraph lines carried messages across continents with the speed of lightning. The Industrial Revolution that Charles had helped to shape was reaching its mature form, and many of his innovations had become integral parts of the modern world. Yet Charles's greatest creation, the analytical engine, remained unbuilt. The detailed drawings and specifications that filled his study represented perhaps the most complete design for a mechanical computer ever conceived, but they remained trapped on paper, awaiting an era with the technological sophistication necessary to bring them to life. Picture Charles in his study during these final years, perhaps on a quiet afternoon with London fog drifting past his windows, reviewing the thousands of drawings and calculations that represented his life's work. The mechanical principles were all sound, the logical structures complete, the programming concepts fully developed. He had created, in theory, a machine that could perform any calculation that human intelligence could conceive. Charles continued to receive visitors interested in his work, though many were motivated more by curiosity about the famous, irascible genius than by genuine understanding of his contributions. He bore these intrusions with patience, still hoping to find someone who might carry on his work or provide the resources necessary to build his engines. His health began to decline gradually, as was natural for a man of his advanced years. The same meticulous attention to detail that had characterized his scientific work now turned to managing his physical limitations, and he adapted his daily routines to accommodate his changing capabilities. Despite his physical decline, Charles's intellectual powers remained sharp until the very end. He continued to correspond with scientific colleagues, to refine his mechanical designs, and to contemplate the implications of mechanical computation for human society. His vision of the future remained undimmed by age or disappointment. The scientific community of Charles's era had largely moved on to other concerns, but a few perceptive individuals recognized that his work represented something unprecedented in human history. These admirers provided Charles with the intellectual companionship and recognition that sustained him through his final years. Chapter 16: Legacy Beyond the Grave. On October 18, 1871, Charles Babbage passed away peacefully at his home in Dorset Street, Marylebone, at the age of 79. His death marked the end of one of the most remarkable careers in the history of science and technology, though the true significance of his contributions would not be fully recognized for many decades to come. The obituaries published after Charles's death reflected the mixed understanding that his contemporaries had of his work. Some praised him as a brilliant mathematician and innovative engineer, while others portrayed him as an eccentric inventor whose ambitious projects had never quite succeeded. Few recognized that he had laid the theoretical foundation for the computer age that was still far in the future. Charles's personal effects included thousands of detailed drawings and specifications for his calculating engines, representing perhaps the most complete early design for a programmable computer. These documents were preserved by admirers who recognized their potential historical value, even though they could not fully appreciate their future significance. The scientific institutions that Charles had helped to establish, including the Royal Astronomical Society and various other learned societies, continued to flourish after his death. His contributions to their founding and early development helped shape the organized scientific community that would eventually produce the discoveries and innovations necessary to build the machines he had envisioned. Picture the quiet ceremony at Kensal Green Cemetery, where Charles was laid to rest, attended by scientific colleagues, family members, and friends who had known him through his famous soirees. The grave was marked with a simple headstone that gave no hint of the revolutionary ideas that lay buried with the man beneath it. In the decades following Charles's death, technology began to catch up with his vision. The precision manufacturing techniques he had needed became available through advances in metalworking and industrial engineering. The theoretical foundations he had laid were gradually rediscovered by new generations of inventors and mathematicians. The first working difference engine was actually built in Sweden during Charles's lifetime, constructed by Georg Schütz based on Charles's published designs. This successful implementation proved that Charles's engineering concepts were sound, even though his own engines remained unfinished. The Swedish machine was used by both British and American governments for calculating astronomical and actuarial tables. Charles's influence extended beyond mechanical computation to encompass his contributions to scientific methodology, institutional organization, and technological innovation. His insistence on precision, his systematic approach to problem-solving, and his vision of the relationship between human intelligence and mechanical capability influenced generations of scientists and engineers who came after him. Chapter 17: The Renaissance of Recognition. The 20th century brought a remarkable renaissance of interest in Charles Babbage's work, as the advent of electronic computers made clear the prescient nature of his theoretical contributions. Computer pioneers like Howard Aiken and John von Neumann studied Charles's designs and marveled at their sophistication and completeness. In 1991, exactly 120 years after Charles's death, a team of researchers at the London Science Museum successfully constructed a working difference engine number 2 using his original specifications. The machine, built to the tolerances achievable with Charles's era's manufacturing techniques, functioned perfectly, calculating mathematical tables with the precision he had envisioned over a century earlier. Picture the moment when the reconstructed engine performed its first calculation, brass gears turning with mechanical precision as numbers cascaded through the mechanism exactly as Charles had imagined. The whirring of the machinery and the clicking of the calculating mechanisms seemed to bridge the centuries, finally giving voice to Charles's silenced dreams. The successful construction of the difference engine vindicated Charles's engineering vision and demonstrated that his failure to complete the machine had been due to funding and manufacturing limitations rather than flawed design. Modern analysis of his analytical engine plans has similarly confirmed that his theoretical work was centuries ahead of its time. Computer historians now recognize Charles as the true father of the computer, and his portrait hangs in research laboratories and computer science departments around the world. The concepts he developed, stored programming, conditional execution, iterative loops, and mechanical memory, became the fundamental building blocks of the digital age. Ada Lovelace's contributions have also received renewed recognition, with historians acknowledging her role as the world's first computer programmer and a visionary thinker about the potential of mechanical computation. The programming language Ada was named in her honor, ensuring that her legacy remains visible to each new generation of computer scientists. The story of Charles and Ada's collaboration has inspired countless books, articles, and documentaries, cementing their place in popular culture as well as scientific history. Their partnership represents one of the most productive intellectual collaborations in history, demonstrating the power of shared vision and complementary talents. Modern museums around the world display reconstructions of Charles's engines, allowing visitors to see and hear the mechanical computation that he pioneered. These exhibits help contemporary audiences understand the ingenious engineering and visionary thinking that went into creating the first computers, even though they were made of brass and steel rather than silicon and electricity. I hope you'll take a moment to subscribe to our channel and like this video if Charles Babbage's story has inspired you as much as it has inspired me. Perhaps you could share in the comments which of his inventions or ideas you found most fascinating. Chapter 18. The Mathematical Dreamer's Philosophy. Throughout his long and productive life, Charles Babbage developed a distinctive philosophy about the relationship between human intelligence and mechanical capability that was far ahead of its time. He believed that machines could be designed not merely to replace human labor, but to extend human intelligence itself, a vision that would not be widely accepted until the computer age. Charles saw mathematics not as an abstract intellectual exercise, but as a practical tool for understanding and reshaping the world. His approach to mechanical computation was grounded in the belief that mathematical principles, properly applied, could solve real problems and improve human life in measurable ways. This practical idealism drove all of his scientific work. Picture Charles in his study, perhaps on a quiet evening near the end of his life, contemplating the philosophical implications of his work. He understood that mechanical computation represented more than mere technological innovation. It suggested a fundamental shift in how humans might approach complex problems and organize their intellectual activities. Charles's writings reveal a deep appreciation for the beauty and elegance of mathematical relationships. He found genuine aesthetic pleasure in the mechanical realization of abstract mathematical principles, seeing his engines not just as useful tools, but as physical embodiments of mathematical truth. This aesthetic dimension of his work helped sustain him through decades of frustration and setbacks. The collaborative nature of Charles's relationship with Ada Lovelace reflected his belief that intellectual progress required the free exchange of ideas among equals. He recognized that his own technical expertise needed to be combined with other forms of intelligence to achieve its full potential, and he actively sought out partnerships with mathematicians, engineers, and even poets who could contribute different perspectives to his work. Charles's approach to failure and setbacks demonstrates remarkable intellectual maturity. Rather than becoming bitter about his unfinished projects, he maintained his faith in the ultimate value of his theoretical contributions. He understood that transformative ideas often require patience, and that vindication might come long after the original innovator has passed away. His vision of the future was remarkably prescient, encompassing not just mechanical computation, but also the social and economic implications of automated calculation. Charles understood that his engines would change not just how mathematical work was done, but also who could access the benefits of sophisticated calculation, potentially democratizing intellectual tools that had previously been available only to specialists. The breadth of Charles's interests and accomplishments reflects a Renaissance approach to knowledge that was becoming increasingly rare in his own era. He refused to be confined to narrow specialization, instead pursuing investigations wherever his curiosity led him, from mechanical engineering to economic policy to astronomical calculation. Chapter 19: Reflections on Time and Progress. As we near the end of our journey through Charles Babbage's remarkable life, it's worth reflecting on the strange ways that time and progress interact to bring ideas to fruition. Charles lived in an era that was simultaneously too early and exactly right for his revolutionary contributions to human knowledge. It was too early because the manufacturing technology needed to build his engines did not yet exist. The precision metalworking, standardized components, and mass production techniques that his designs required would not be developed for several more decades. Yet it was exactly the right time for the theoretical groundwork to be laid, for the fundamental concepts of programmable computation to be worked out in careful detail. Charles's story reminds us that innovation is not a simple linear process, but a complex dance between vision and capability, between what can be imagined and what can be implemented. The gap between his theoretical achievements and their practical realization demonstrates how ideas can exist in a kind of suspended animation, waiting for the right technological and social conditions to support their full expression. Picture the London of Charles's final years, a city transformed by industry and commerce, but still dependent on human calculation for its most complex mathematical needs. Steam engines drove factories and locomotives, but the computers that would eventually control such machinery existed only in the detailed drawings of an aging inventor whose neighbors knew him primarily as a charming host and entertaining conversationalist. The patience required for truly transformative work is one of the most remarkable aspects of Charles's character. He continued refining his designs and developing his theories long after it became clear that he would not live to see them implemented. This kind of faith in the future represents a profound form of intellectual generosity, contributing to human knowledge without expectation of personal reward or recognition. Charles's influence extended far beyond his specific inventions to encompass his approach to scientific methodology and his vision of organized research. His emphasis on precision, systematic investigation, and collaborative effort helped establish standards for scientific work that continue to influence researchers today. The global impact of ideas that Charles developed in his London workshop demonstrates how intellectual achievements can transcend their original context to become part of humanity's shared inheritance. The concepts he pioneered now shape daily life for billions of people who have never heard his name, a form of immortality that few can achieve. As we consider Charles's legacy, we might ask ourselves what ideas currently seem impossible or impractical, but might be vindicated by future generations. His story encourages us to take seriously the visionary thinkers of our own era, even when their ideas seem to outstrip our current capabilities. Charles Babbage's life offers us a profound meditation on the nature of human creativity, the power of persistence, and the mysterious ways that individual vision can ultimately reshape the world. Born into a world of horse-drawn carriages and hand-calculated mathematical tables, he died having conceived the theoretical foundations for the computer age that would transform human civilization. His story teaches us that true innovation requires not just technical skill, but also profound imagination, the ability to see possibilities that others cannot perceive. The brass gears and mechanical linkages of his designs were secondary to the revolutionary concepts they embodied, concepts that would find their ultimate expression in technologies Charles could never have imagined. The partnership between Charles and Ada Lovelace demonstrates the collaborative nature of great achievements. Their combined vision exceeded what either could have accomplished alone, reminding us that the most important breakthroughs often emerge from the intersection of different types of intelligence and perspective. Perhaps most importantly, Charles's life exemplifies the kind of faith in the future that drives genuine progress. His willingness to pursue ideas that were far ahead of their time, despite skepticism and setbacks, shows us that transformative work often requires a kind of intellectual courage that transcends immediate practical concerns. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you might reflect on the quiet persistence of genius, working in solitude to create possibilities that future generations will inherit and develop. Charles Babbage spent decades laboring over mechanical drawings and theoretical calculations, never fully knowing whether his ideas would ever find practical expression, yet driven by an unshakable conviction that his work mattered. The gentle clicking of mechanical calculators, the whirring of brass gears in precise motion, the satisfaction of problems solved through patient application of mathematical principles. These are the sounds and sensations that filled Charles's working life. In the quiet of your own rest, you might imagine the peace he found in his workshop, surrounded by the tools and materials of invention, guided always by the vision of machines that could extend human intelligence into realms previously unimaginable. His legacy reminds us that the future is built by individuals who dare to dream beyond the limitations of their present circumstances, who see in the mechanical principles of their own era the seeds of transformations that will reshape the world. Charles Babbage lived such a life, and his gentle presence continues to inspire all who encounter his remarkable story. Sweet dreams, and remember that tomorrow's impossibilities are today's opportunities for those with vision enough to see them. Before you close your eyes, take a moment to subscribe to our channel and like this video if Charles Babbage's extraordinary journey has touched your mind and heart. Share in the comments which moment from his life resonated most deeply with you. Perhaps his early struggles with illness, his brilliant partnership with Ada Lovelace, or his unwavering faith in mechanical computation. Your thoughts and insights help build our community of curious minds exploring the hidden stories of human achievement. Rest well, knowing that, like Charles, your own dreams and ideas have the power to reach across time and touch the future in ways you may never fully know.